The Galactic Military Academy floated in the darkness of space like a massive metal flower with petals reaching in every direction. Station 7 had trained soldiers from over 40 different species for nearly 300 years. Every corridor smelled different depending on which species lived in that section. Some hallways were hot and humid for the amphibian races. Others were cold and dry for the reptilian beings. The station was a place where the galaxy's many peoples learned to fight together and protect the coalition that kept peace among the stars. Commander stood at the front of Training Room 17 and watched his class of cadets file in through the wide double doors. He was a tall reptilian being with gleaming amber scales that caught the light whenever he moved. His eyes were vertical slits of deep gold, and when he spoke, his natural voice came out as hisses and clicks that his translator box converted into standard galactic common so everyone could understand him. He had trained thousands of soldiers over his long career, and he could usually predict how each class would perform just by watching them walk into the room. Today he had cadets from 12 different worlds. They came in first as they always did, their bird-like bodies covered in iridescent feathers that shifted from blue to green to purple as they moved. They were small and delicate, with hollow bones that made them excellent pilots but poor ground fighters. They clustered together near the windows, their large eyes blinking rapidly as they took in their new surroundings. Behind them came the stocky amphibians with mottled blue skin that always looked wet even when it was dry. Their throat sacs pulsed with every breath, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that other species often found disturbing. They secreted toxins from their skin when frightened, which made them unpopular roommates. A squeeze through the doorway last, its massive silicon-based body scraping against the frame. It looked like a walking boulder with arms and legs, its crystalline structure humming with frequencies that most organic beings could not hear. Were nearly indestructible but incredibly slow, and this one had to duck its head to fit under the ceiling. Commander counted heads and checked his roster. 47 cadets in total. His eyes moved across the room and stopped on a figure sitting alone in the middle section, neither at the front with the eager ones nor at the back with the nervous ones. Cadet Brooks was one of only 3 humans ever admitted to the academy. He was 22 years old by the human calendar, with dark hair cropped short in the military style and calm brown eyes that rarely showed what he was thinking. He was lean and unremarkable by the standards of his own species, neither tall nor short, neither muscular nor thin. He sat with his hands folded on the desk in front of him, watching everything and everyone with quiet attention. The other cadets kept their distance from him. They did this with all humans. The galaxy had only known humanity for 60 years, ever since their primitive ships had stumbled into coalition space and announced themselves to the universe. In that short time, humans had earned a reputation that made other species uncomfortable. They were persistent predators, evolved to chase their prey across vast distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. They were death, born on a planet so hostile that it regularly tried to kill them with earthquakes, storms, volcanoes, and 1,000 different varieties of venomous creatures. And perhaps most disturbing of all, they had somehow convinced other predators on their world to live with them, to work with them, to love them. Wolves had become dogs, wild cats had become house pets, humans had looked at animals that could kill them and decided to make friends instead. No other species in the known galaxy had ever done anything like this. Did not seem bothered by the empty seats around him. He had grown up on a frontier colony called 442b, a harsh world at the edge of human space where survival meant working alone more often than not. His parents had been, slowly turning a hostile rock into something that might one day support cities and farms. He had learned to hunt and trap before he learned to read. He had killed his first dangerous animal at age 9 when a rock serpent had gotten into the family shelter. Commander cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy," he said, his translator giving his words a flat mechanical quality that stripped away the natural melody of his native tongue. You have been selected from billions of candidates across coalition space. You represent the best your species have to offer. Over the next 4 years, we will determine if that is good enough. He pressed a button on his control pad, and holographic images appeared in the air above his head. Battles, explosions, alien creatures with too many teeth and not enough mercy. The galaxy is not safe, continued. It has never been safe. The coalition exists because our ancestors realized that survival required cooperation. Alone, each of our species would eventually fall to predators or disease or war. Together, we have built something that might last. He let the images fade and looked at his cadets with eyes that had seen more death than most of them could imagine. Today we begin your psychological evaluation. The coalition must know how each species responds to primal fear. We must understand your instincts, your limitations, your breaking points. This information will help us place you in roles where you can serve most effectively. The cadets shifted in their seats. Even the crystals vibrated with nervous energy. We will introduce you to juvenile specimens of the galaxy's most feared apex predator, announced. The Shadow Stalker. A murmur rippled through the room. Notice the grabbing each other's wing arms, their feathers fluffing up in automatic fear response. They had begun to sweat their defensive toxins, filling the air around them with a sharp, acidic smell. Even the massive took a step backward, its body scraping against the wall behind it. Had heard of shadow stalkers. Everyone had. They were six-legged pack hunters from a high-gravity world, responsible for the extinction of 3 sentient species before the Coalition had finally contained them on preserved worlds. Adults could grow to 4 meters long and weigh as much as a small ground vehicle. They could see in complete darkness, run faster than most vehicles, and their claws could shred through military-grade armor plating like paper. For most species in the galaxy, the Shadow Stalker represented the ultimate nightmare, the perfect predator, the thing that lurked in genetic memory and whispered that no matter how advanced civilization became, something out there could still eat you. The lights in the training room dimmed. A section of the wall slid open, and handlers in heavy reinforced suits wheeled in a containment unit made of transparent material that did not recognize. Inside the unit, 3 shapes moved in the shadows, and 60 golden eyes caught the remaining light and reflected it back like tiny suns. The cubs were here. The containment unit hummed with energy as the handlers positioned it in the center of the training room. Inside, the 3 cubs prowled back and forth, their obsidian fur absorbing light so completely that they looked like moving holes in reality. Each cub was about the size of a large dog, though their 6 legs and elongated bodies made them seem larger somehow, more dangerous, more wrong in a way that triggered ancient alarm systems in every organic brain watching them. Commander stepped behind a protective barrier that rose from the floor with a soft mechanical whir. Instructor Vel joined him there, her willowy body moving with the grace of flowing water. She had 4 arms that never stopped moving, adjusting instruments and taking notes on multiple data pads simultaneously. Her compound eyes reflected hundreds of tiny images of the cubs, and her antennae twitched with academic excitement mixed with professional caution. "Remain in your seats," ordered, his voice carrying across the room despite the growing noise of nervous cadets. "The cubs are fed and docile. We simply wish to observe your responses. This is not a test of courage. This is not a test of strength. We are gathering data on instinctive reactions. There is no wrong response." He pressed another button on his control pad. The containment field dropped. Chaos erupted immediately, exactly as it predicted. The scattered like startled birds, which they essentially were, their wings beating frantically as they sought the highest points in the room. 2 of them collided in midair and crashed into a display screen, sending sparks and feathers flying in all directions. A third hit a light fixture and hung there, too terrified to let go, shrieking in its native language about death and doom and ancestors. They responded as their biology demanded. Their skin glands opened fully, secreting massive amounts of defensive toxins that filled their section of the room with an acrid smell so powerful that nearby cadets began gagging and coughing. One accidentally sprayed a that had landed too close, and the bird-like creature immediately began vomiting. The massive did not run because could not run. Instead, it tried to back away, its huge body slamming into desks and chairs and walls with tremendous force. The floor cracked under its panicked steps, and its crystalline structure began vibrating at stress frequencies so intense that several nearby windows developed hairline fractures. Other species reacted in their own ways. A group of methane breathers sealed themselves inside their environmental suits and refused to move. A crystalline entity actually shattered into smaller pieces and tried to scatter across the floor before remembering that it could not survive in fragments for long. Two cadets from a species that could not immediately identify simply fell unconscious, their bodies shutting down as a defense mechanism against overwhelming fear. The three cubs stood in the center of this storm of terror, initially startled by the commotion around them. Their heads swiveled on flexible necks, 6 eyes each tracking movement and sound and heat signature. They were young, but their instincts were already sharp. One of them dropped into a hunting crouch, its muscles tensing under that light-eating fur. Another let out a chirping sound, high and quick, communication with its siblings about threats and opportunities. Commander observed everything from behind his barrier, his clawed hand moving rapidly across his data pad as he recorded observations. This was precisely the reaction that every class produced. Every species in the galaxy carried genetic memory of being prey, even the ones who had become apex predators on their own worlds. Evolution had written fear into their deepest programming, and the Shadow Stalker was designed by nature to trigger that fear. Then his stylus stopped moving. One of the cubs had separated from its siblings. It was the largest of the three, with a distinctive white marking above its primary eyes that looked almost like a crown or a star. It moved slowly across the floor, weaving between overturned chairs and scattered data pads, but it did not move in a hunting crouch. Its body language was different, curious rather than predatory, hesitant rather than confident. Its 6 golden eyes were fixed on a single point in the middle section of the room. Brooks had not moved from his seat. He sat exactly where he had been sitting when the containment field dropped, his posture relaxed but alert, his hands still folded on the desk in front of him. His breathing was slow and measured, his heartbeat steady enough that could see no pulse jumping in his neck or temples. He watched the approaching cub with what the commander could only describe as patient interest, the way someone might observe an unusual cloud formation or an unexpected flower blooming in concrete. The cub stopped 2 meters away from the human. It sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring wide, processing the complex chemical information that every living creature broadcast constantly. It tilted its head to one side, then the other, those 6 eyes examining from every angle. Its siblings called to it from across the room. Their chirps escalated to worried growls, warnings and demands and confusion all mixed together. Why had it left the pack? What was it doing? What was this strange creature that smelled like nothing they had ever encountered? The white-marked cub ignored them completely. It took another step toward, then another, until it stood close enough that could have reached out and touched it without fully extending his arm. The cub's breath was warm on his hand, carrying scents of raw meat and something else, something almost electric that could not identify. Slowly extended his hand, palm down, fingers loosely curled. "Cadet Brooks," Commander called out, his voice tight with alarm, "do not make any sudden movements. Do not provoke the creature. Keep your hands still and await further instructions." Did not respond. He kept his eyes on the cub, not challenging, not avoiding, just present and aware and utterly calm. The cub sniffed his hand thoroughly, its nostrils working overtime to process this unprecedented situation. It had never encountered a human before. It had never encountered anything that smelled quite like this, a predator that was not attacking, prey that was not running, a creature that simply existed in its space without fear or aggression. Then, to the absolute astonishment of every being in the room who was conscious enough to witness it, the cub pressed its massive head against its palm and let out a sound that no had ever made in recorded history. It purred. The sound was deep and rumbling, vibrating through the cub's entire body and into his hand and up his arm. It was the sound of contentment, of trust, of a connection being formed across the impossible gulf between species. Instructor Vel dropped all 4 of her data pads. The other 2 cubs had stopped calling for their sibling. They stood perfectly still, their own heads tilted, listening to that unprecedented sound. Then, as if some decision had been made in a language no organic translator could interpret, they began moving across the room toward the human as well. Did not panic. He did not even seem surprised. He simply sat there and waited as 2 more apex predators came to introduce themselves. Within 10 minutes, the training room had transformed into something that no one present would ever forget. The chaos had settled into stunned silence as cadets from 12 different worlds watched the impossible scene unfolding in the middle section of the room. Brooks sat in his chair with 3 shadow stalker cubs arranged around him like he was the center of their universe. The smallest cub had climbed into his lap, despite weighing nearly 40 kilograms. Its 6 legs folded awkwardly beneath its body as it pressed against his chest. His uniform was covered in fine black fur that seemed to drink the light, and he could feel the cub's heartbeat against his own, strong and steady in content. The second cub had curled around his feet, its long body wrapping almost completely around the base of his chair. Its body heat warmed him through his uniform boots, and every few seconds it would shift slightly, pressing closer, making sure it maintained physical contact with this strange new creature that made it feel safe. The white-marked leader lay pressed against his side, its massive head resting on his thigh while absently scratched behind what might have been ears. The purring continued, 3 different tones now harmonizing into something that sounded almost like music, a song of trust and belonging that had never been sung before in the presence of any species except themselves. The other cadets watched from their scattered positions around the room. They had stopped trying to escape and now perched on light fixtures and wall brackets, their large eyes blinking in disbelief. They had managed to stop secreting toxins, though the smell still hung heavy in the air. Even the had stopped vibrating, its crystalline surface reflecting the scene in 1,000 fractured images. Commander lowered the protective barrier slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements or loud noises. The white-marked cub lifted its head immediately, tracking the reptilian officer with all 6 eyes. A low warning rumble built in its chest, deep and threatening, a sound that promised violence if the approaching creature proved to be a threat to its new friend. Stopped moving immediately. Fascinating, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. They are protecting him. The cubs have identified the human as Pack. Instructor Vel had retrieved her data pads and was recording everything with trembling hands. She had spent 15 years studying behavior on preserved worlds, observing from safe distances, analyzing footage, building theoretical models of their social structures. Nothing in her extensive research had prepared her for this moment. "This is not possible," she whispered, her compound eyes fixed on the scene before her. "The cubs should be in full defensive posture. They should have identified the human as either threat or prey. Their instincts should be screaming at them to attack or retreat. There is no precedent for this behavior. There is no category for this in any behavioral model we have ever developed." Looked up from the cubs, his expression slightly apologetic, as if he had accidentally broken some important rule. "Sorry, sir. I can try to move them if you need me to. I'm not sure they'll like it, but I can try." "Do not move, Cadet," ordered, his voice firm but not harsh. Whatever you are doing, continue doing it. Just explain to us what that is. I'm not doing anything special, sir. I'm just sitting here. That is clearly not entirely accurate. Explain your thought process when the containment field dropped. Explain your emotional state. Something triggered this response from the Cubs, and we need to understand what that something was. Considered the question carefully, one hand still moving in slow strokes across the white-marked cub's fur. The cub had relaxed again now that had stopped approaching, its warning rumble fading back into that unprecedented purr. I grew up on 442B, said finally. It's a frontier world, mostly wilderness, very few people. We had a lot of dangerous wildlife there. Rock serpents that could swallow a grown man whole. Acid beetles that ate through metal. Gravity wolves that hunted in packs of 30 or more. You learn pretty quick that most predators don't actually want to fight if they don't have to. Explain, said, genuinely curious now. Fighting is expensive, continued. It costs energy. It risks injury. Even if you win, you might get hurt, and getting hurt in the wild usually means death, just slower. So most predators are actually pretty cautious. They want to know things before they commit to any action. Is this creature a threat? Is it prey? Or is it just part of the landscape, something that can be ignored? He gestured at the cubs with his free hand, the one not currently buried in fur. When the field dropped and everyone started panicking, the cubs saw a bunch of prey animals acting like prey. Running, screaming, producing fear chemicals. All of that confirmed what their instincts already told them about everyone else in this room. Prey creatures, potential meals, things to be hunted. But you did not run, Instructor Vel said, her voice filled with academic wonder. I didn't run, agreed. I didn't attack either. I just sat here. I paid attention to them, acknowledged that they were there and that they were dangerous, but I didn't treat them like enemies. I think maybe they'd never encountered that before. Something that wasn't afraid, wasn't aggressive, just was. You were not afraid. Vel's voice pitched high with disbelief. Her antennae were quivering so hard they looked like they might detach from her head. You faced 3 apex predator juveniles with no protective equipment, no weapons, no barrier between you and creatures that could have torn you apart in seconds, and you experienced no fear at all. Thought about this for a moment, clearly trying to give an honest and accurate answer. I respected what they could do, he said carefully. I understood the danger. My heart rate went up a little when the field dropped and my body started preparing for potential action. But that's not really fear, is it? That's just readiness. Fear is when the feeling takes over and makes decisions for you. Fear is when you can't think clearly because all your brain wants to do is run away. He scratched the white-marked cub under its chin, and it made a sound that was almost embarrassingly happy. I was thinking clearly the whole time. I saw the cubs and I thought about what I knew about predators and pack behavior. I thought about my options and chose the one that seemed most likely to result in everyone staying calm and nobody getting hurt. The fear never really happened because I was too busy thinking. Commander exchanged a long look with Instructor Vel. In that look was years of shared experience, thousands of evaluations, countless cadets from hundreds of species. Neither of them had ever encountered anything quite like this. Humans are persistence predators, said slowly, working through the implications. Your ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. You evolved to control your fear responses, to override panic with patience. I guess so, said with a small shrug that made the cub in his lap grumble with annoyance at being jostled. I never really thought about it that way. It's just how I am. It's just how humans are, I think. We get scared like anyone else, but we're pretty good at telling the fear to shut up when we need to get things done. The smallest cub yawned hugely, revealing rows of serrated teeth that could puncture military-grade armor plating, then tucked its head against its chest and closed all 6 of its eyes. She's tired, said softly, looking down at the cub with something very close to affection. They all are. I think this has been a stressful day for them too. New place, new smells, lots of screaming and running. They're just bobbies, really. They just wanted to feel safe. And they feel safe with you, said. It was not a question. I think so, sir. I hope so. Across the room, a cadet lost its grip on a light fixture and crashed to the floor with a startled squawk. The white-marked cub's head snapped up instantly, all 6 eyes targeting the sound, a warning growl building in its throat. Put his hand on the cub's neck and made a soft shushing sound. Easy, he murmured. Just a clumsy bird, nothing to worry about. The cub settled down immediately, trusting the human's assessment of the situation without question. Every being in the room who witnessed this understood that something fundamental had just shifted in their understanding of both humans and the galaxy would never look quite the same again. Word of the incident spread through Station 7 like fire through dry grass. By evening meal, footage of the human cadets surrounded by shadow stalker cubs had been viewed over 2 million times on the Academy's internal network. Cadets and instructors alike gathered in common areas to watch the recording again and again, pausing at the moment when the white-marked cub first pressed its head into its palm, replaying the unprecedented sound of purring until the audio file became the most downloaded item in the station's entire database. By the next morning, from 3 different sectors had submitted formal requests to interview Cadet Brooks. By the end of the first week, the Preservation Council had sent an official communication asking if the human might be willing to visit their primary reserve world for further study. By the end of the month, the story had leaked beyond the Academy and into general coalition news feeds, where it sparked debates and discussions on thousands of worlds. Found all of this attention deeply uncomfortable. He had done nothing special as far as he could tell. He had simply sat still and let the cubs approach him. Any human would have done the same thing, probably. Well, maybe not any human. Some humans were stupid about animals, but most humans, surely. The cubs were eventually returned to their handlers and transported back to the preserve world where they lived. Felt a surprising pang of loss when the white-marked cub was led away, and he could have sworn that the cub looked back at him with something like longing in its 6 golden eyes. He told himself he was imagining things. They were just animals. Smart animals, dangerous animals, but still just animals. Meanwhile, Commander was not sleeping well. He had requested a complete species file from the Coalition's central database, and he had spent 3 nights reading through humanity's bloody, beautiful, impossible history. The more he read, the less he understood, and the less he understood, the more fascinated he became. Humans had evolved on a planet called Earth, a world so hostile that it regularly tried to kill its inhabitants with earthquakes that swallowed cities, storms that flattened entire regions, volcanoes that buried civilizations under ash and fire, and disease outbreaks that wiped out millions. The planet's star bombarded them with radiation. The climate swung between extremes that would have killed most species. 70% of the surface was covered in water that humans could not breathe, filled with creatures that considered humans a tasty snack. And yet they had survived, more than survived, they had thrived. They had started as small, weak apes on a savanna filled with predators that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than they were. They should have been eaten into extinction within a few generations. Instead, they had developed a hunting strategy so bizarre that had to read about it 3 times before he believed it was real. Persistence hunting. Humans would identify a prey animal and then simply follow it. Not chase it, not sprint after it, just follow. They would walk after their prey for hours, sometimes days, never letting it rest, never letting it recover, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion and died. Humans could do this because they sweated through their skin, a cooling mechanism so efficient that they could maintain steady movement in heat that would kill almost any other mammal on their planet. They had literally evolved to walk things to death. But that was not the part that kept awake at night. The part that haunted him was what humans had done with their predator instincts once they no longer needed them for survival. They had domesticated wolves. Stared at the images on his screen, pictures of ancient humans sitting beside animals that were clearly wolf ancestors, animals with sharp teeth and powerful jaws, and every instinct geared toward hunting and killing. According to the records, this process had started at least 15,000 years before humans developed writing. They had somehow convinced wolves, one of their planet's most efficient pack predators, to abandon their wild ways and live with humans instead. The wolves had become dogs. They had been transformed over generations from deadly hunters into loyal companions, working partners, beloved family members. Humans had looked at creatures that could have killed them and decided to make friends instead. And they had not stopped with wolves. They had domesticated wild cats, animals whose larger cousins were among the most feared predators on the human. They had tamed massive bovines that could crush a human with one kick. They had trained birds of prey, creatures with talons that could puncture skulls, to hunt for them and return willingly to their handlers. They had even formed some kind of symbiotic relationship with oceanic creatures so large that a single one could swallow a human whole. Found records of humans who had lived among great apes in the wild, learning their languages and being accepted into their social groups. He found stories of humans who had befriended solitary predators that had never shown social behavior with any creature before. He found footage of humans swimming alongside ocean leviathans, touching them, even riding on their massive bodies through the deep water. Every species that humans encountered they tried to befriend. Not conquer, not exterminate, not avoid. Befriend. They extended their hands to things that could have killed them, over and over again, generation after generation, until the killing stopped and something new emerged. It was madness. It was genius. It was the most utterly human thing that had ever encountered. He thought about the 46 other cadets in that training room, all of them running and screaming and excreting fear chemicals, and doing exactly what their evolution had programmed them to do when faced with an apex predator. He thought about Brooks sitting calmly in his chair, not because he was broken or defective, but because his species had evolved past the need for panic. Humans did not run from predators. They walked toward them with their hands extended and somehow convinced those predators that friendship was better than violence. When reported for his next scheduled evaluation session, Commander dismissed the standard tests without looking at them. "Sit down," Cadet Brooks said, gesturing toward a chair across from his desk. Sat, his posture relaxed and attentive, exactly the same as it had been in the training room with 3 apex predator cubs crawling all over him. "I have been researching your species," said, "extensively." "Yes, sir, I figured you might." "Your ancestors domesticated wolves." "Yes, sir, dogs are very popular on human worlds. Most families have at least one." "You keep predators as family members." "We keep lots of animals as family members, sir. Dogs, cats, birds, fish, reptiles, rodents. Some people keep insects, though that's pretty niche. There's a guy on my who has a pet rock serpent. My mom thinks he's crazy, but the serpent seems happy enough." Stared at the human for a long moment, trying to understand how someone could say such things so casually. "I am recommending you for the Corps," he said finally. Blinked. This was clearly not what he had expected to hear. "Sir, the Coalition has spent centuries containing dangerous species, building walls, maintaining separations. We have operated under the assumption that some creatures are simply too dangerous to coexist with, that the only solution is isolation and control." Leaned forward, his amber eyes intent on the human's face. "Perhaps we have been approaching the problem incorrectly. Perhaps what we needed all along was not bigger walls, but someone willing to extend a hand." "I'm not sure I understand, sir." "You looked at predators and saw potential friends. That perspective, Cadet Brooks, may be more valuable than any weapon the Coalition possesses. They have been classified as mindless killing machines for 300 years. But what if they are not mindless? What if they simply never had anyone approach them without fear? Thought about the white-marked cub pressing against his palm, about that unprecedented purr, about the way all three cubs had chosen him as pack without hesitation. "I think you might be right, sir," he said quietly. "I think they're a lot smarter than anyone realizes. I think they just need someone to give them a chance." "Then you will be that someone," said. "Congratulations, Cadet Brooks. Your life just became much more interesting." 6 years had passed since that day in Training Room 17, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Diplomatic Envoy Brooks stood on the observation deck of the Coalition vessel Harmony, watching the planet Prime grow larger in the main viewport. The world was beautiful in a terrifying way, all dark forests and jagged mountains and clouds that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was a high-gravity planet, which meant everything that evolved there was dense and powerful and built for combat. The perfect breeding ground for apex predators. Was 38 years old now, his dark hair showing the first traces of gray at the temples, his face carrying lines that spoke of years spent in difficult negotiations and tense first contact situations. He had traveled to 17 different worlds as part of the Corps, establishing communication with species that the Coalition had written off as too dangerous or too alien to approach. He had been injured 4 times, nearly killed twice, and had succeeded in opening diplomatic relations with 6 previously hostile civilizations. But this mission was different. This mission was personal. Pressed against his leg, her massive head reaching almost to his hip, stood Ambassador Shade. She was the white-marked cub who had first approached him in that classroom 6 years ago, now fully grown at 3.5 meters long, her obsidian fur gleaming with health and vitality. Her 6 golden eyes watched the approaching planet with an intensity that had learned to recognize as anticipation mixed with nervousness. She had grown up alongside him during his training and early career, first as a research subject in the Coalition's attempt to understand what had happened in that training room, then as a partner in his diplomatic work, and finally as a fully recognized ambassador in her own right. The process had taken years of patient work, building trust and understanding piece by piece, proving over and over again that we're not mindless killing machines, but intelligent beings capable of complex thought and genuine emotional connections. The breakthrough had come 3 years ago, when Shade had learned to use a modified translator device that converted her chirps and growls and purrs into standard galactic common. Her first translated words had been broadcast across Coalition space and had changed everything. "We remember," she had said in that historic moment. "We remember when the Skywalkers came with fire and death. We remember our cities burning. We remember our people dying. We chose to become what they expected us to be because being monsters was better than being victims. But we never forgot what we truly were. We were waiting for someone to see us, to really see us." The revelation had shaken the Coalition to its core. There had been a spacefaring civilization once long ago, before a species that no longer existed had attacked them and driven them back to there. They had survived by becoming exactly what their enemies feared, predators so deadly that no one would ever try to conquer them again. And then they had waited, for 300 years, for someone brave enough or foolish enough to approach them without weapons and walls. A human had been that someone. Of course it had been a human. Put his hand on Shade's neck, feeling the powerful muscles shift beneath her fur. "Nervous?" he asked. She responded with a complex series of chirps and growls that her translator rendered into words. "My people have waited generations for this day. I am not nervous. I am ready." The council might take some convincing. There are still those who remember the old conflicts. Some of them lost family members to attacks. "Then we will convince them," Shade said firmly. "Together as pack." That word pack had become the official term for the relationship between humans and, not allies, not partners, not diplomatic contacts. Pack, family. The ones who run together. They had chosen this word themselves after learning about human history with dogs, recognizing something familiar in the ancient story of wolves and humans finding each other. The other coalition species had been baffled at first by this development. Then they had been unsettled. Then gradually, slowly, painfully, they had been forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the universe and its possibilities. If humans could form pack bonds with shadow stalkers, the most feared predators in known space, what else might be possible? What other species had been written off too quickly? What other walls had been built unnecessarily? What other bridges might be constructed if someone was willing to extend a hand? The questions had spread like ripples in a pond, touching every corner of coalition space. Programs expanded. Research initiatives launched. First contact protocols were rewritten to emphasize patience and understanding rather than caution and containment. The galaxy was changing, one extended hand at a time. Ambassador Shade, called a voice from behind them, turned to see Captain Martinez approaching, a stocky human woman with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone who had commanded starships for 30 years. We're beginning our descent. The Coalition Council has confirmed that they're ready to receive you. Thank you, Captain, Shade replied, her translator giving her words a slightly mechanical quality that did not diminish their gravity. This is a historic moment. Yes, it is, Martinez agreed. She looked at with an expression that mixed respect with something like awe. You know, when I was a girl, my grandmother used to tell me stories about humans taming wolves. I always thought they were just myths, fairy tales to make children feel brave. Then you came along and did the same thing with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise as he always was. I didn't do anything special, I just sat still. You sat still while 3 apex predators approached you, and you convinced them to be your friends. If that's not special, I don't know what is. Shade made a sound that her translator rendered as laughter, though it came out as a series of clicking chirps. He always says this. He always refuses to accept what he did, but we remember. My people remember. He was the first to see us as we truly are, the first to offer friendship instead of fear. This is why we chose him. This is why we will always choose him. The ship shuddered slightly as it entered the upper atmosphere of Prime. Through the viewport, could see other beginning to emerge from the dark forests below, thousands of 6-legged shapes looking up at the descending vessel. They were not attacking formations. They were welcome parties. Are you ready? Asked Shade quietly. I was born ready, she replied. I have been preparing for this moment since I first touched your hand in that room full of frightened creatures. I knew then that you were different, that your species was different, that everything was about to change. I was just trying not to get eaten. Yes, and in doing so you changed the course of history. That is very human of you. Laughed, a genuine sound of amusement and affection. I guess it is. The harmony landed in a clearing that had been prepared for this exact purpose, surrounded by forests of trees so dark they looked like shadows given solid form. The landing ramp extended and walked down it with Shade at his side, human and together, exactly as they had been for 6 years. Waiting for them were representatives from the Coalition Council, diplomats and politicians from dozens of species, all watching with expressions that ranged from curiosity to fear to hope. Behind them, arranged in perfect rows, were hundreds of, the largest gathering of their kind since the old wars. Stopped at the bottom of the ramp and looked out at the assembled crowd. He thought about that day in the training room, when he had been nothing but a cadet from a frontier world, sitting still while everyone around him panicked. He had done nothing special then, and he supposed he was not doing anything special now. He was just refusing to be afraid. And sometimes, he had learned, that was enough to change everything. Shade stepped forward, her 6 eyes sweeping across the gathered beings, and raised her voice in a sound that needed no translation. It was the purr that had first heard 6 years ago, amplified now by hundreds of her people joining in, a song of welcome and belonging that echoed across the clearing and up into the darkening sky. The coalition representative stood frozen, uncertain how to respond to something so unprecedented, but knew what to do. He had always known. He extended his hand, palm down, fingers loosely curled, and waited for someone to take it. After a moment that seemed to last forever, the first delegate stepped forward. Then another. Then another. Species that had feared each other for centuries began moving toward the center of that clearing, drawn by something older and more powerful than fear. Hope. The galaxy would never be the same. And it had all started with a human who refused to run, and a cub who had been brave enough to approach him. Pack. Family. The ones who run together.